Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming and listening to what I've got to share with you in the next 30 minutes. So our first kind of talk of 2024, design talk, but it's actually going to be a lot of dev crossover in this as well. As you'll see on the screen, we've got the word object on there, and we'll share a little bit more about that in a moment. But really want to kind of share with you something that me and Stephen have been working on in the past kind of like 6 months or so, summer of last year, around a new process that we've been using from a UX point of view called ORCA. So yeah, looking to really help wrangle complexity early on in our projects. So yeah, give you a little bit of a overview of what we're going to cover. So brief introduction into ORCA. How it's helping us today, where we've used it, and what the future of ORCA looks like for us here at Kyan, and then wrap up with a couple of questions if anybody's got it. So I'll try and get this all done within 30 minutes. So let's kick off. So brief introduction into ORCA. So what is ORCA? Well, ORCA is a scalable, flexible, remixable, iterative process that essentially takes complexity and turns that into a really neat structure, giving clarity and confidence to go into design and development. But what does ORCA stand for? Well, actually ORCA is a set of 4 questions. The first being, what are the objects used in the user's mental models? So again, word object there, going to relate to like object oriented programming. Next one is the R, so what are the objects' relationships to each other? And then the C focuses on what call to actions do objects offer our users. And lastly, the A of ORCA is what are the attributes that make up the object, so the different types of content. Who created all of this? So a lady called Sophia V. Prater basically popularized the term and methodology of object-oriented UX back in 2013. And in 2014, she developed a diagramming kind of tool called the object map. And this is where the ORCA process started to emerge, but she at the time acknowledges that she didn't have the word ORCA or the thinking of that back then, but it was definitely starting to come out of the woodwork. She then first published and started talking about object-oriented UX in 2015 on a list apart, and it's probably around 2017 that I first came across object-oriented UX on a live UX seminar where she was on there, and I can't remember exactly what the subject matter was, but she came in and kind of started talking about this approach. And back then I thought, like, this is quite complicated and quite heavy kind of thing. So I kind of discounted it as a thing to look at that time. But since then and over the years, she's been taking object-oriented UX and building out this ORCA process into the likes of Adobe, Autodesk, CNN, and many more. And it probably was back in, beginning of last year that it surfaced up on my feeds again, and she had developed this ORCA process, and it kind of really made a lot more sense and a lot more practical things for us to kind of look at. So as a result, that me and Stephen started to have a look at it from there. So what is object-oriented UX? Firstly, so as she describes it in her article, object-oriented UX is a design philosophy for designing digital systems that respect the fact that people think in objects, thus need consistent, recognizable objects to understand an environment or a product. From there, then where does ORCA fit into that? Well, ORCA is basically the framework process that helps you achieve this by synthesizing research and achieving a naturally intuitive UX. I think it's important here as well to kind of just acknowledge what object-oriented UX and ORCA doesn't do. Well, first off, it doesn't guarantee product market fit, but it can definitely help you get a product to market in a quick way. It doesn't work without research. Sophia admittedly says that it is a shit in, shit out process. However, we can start it without research, But the great thing about ORCA is that it will start to generate a ton of questions that can help us kind of go, you know what, we don't need to do a huge amount of research. We just need to get the answer for this one particular thing to help us unblock. So it helps really push us forwards quickly. It doesn't create interaction design, but it does definitely helps direct and inform what interaction design could be. Again, it doesn't create design systems, but it's a natural advocate of design systems and helps kind of be a really great partner in structuring design systems. It doesn't look to replace or produce the whole thing of information architecture, but it's an important artifact that really helps enhance our other activities around content modeling, taxonomy, site mapping, user flows. And lastly, it doesn't look to come in and completely replace the process. The whole idea of it is to really help enhance what we're currently doing today. So how is it helping us today here at Kyan? So across the projects that we've used it on and through our departments, we've seen the benefits in design where we are creating or it's helping to create consistent and intuitive interfaces. It's helping to foster component reusability and really think about like what is it that we need to be using in certain situations. It's helping us to kind of get a really good understanding of the holistic experience early on before we've actually designed a single screen. And also, and most importantly, helping to reduce ambiguity as best as possible before we start going into design. From an engineering point of view, it's the aim of it and what we are hoping it will do is help provide a bit more kind of structured development, help us to kind of start thinking in the way that you guys go about building the products, digital products and websites that we do. It advocates and gets upfront collaboration with you guys into the design talks right at the beginning. It helps kind of give that kind of clear interactions as to what things are intended to do within the actual experience, as well as help optimize performance. So identify where we're actually developing things, the same thing in just different ways, but let's just design it once and we can just use it throughout the solution. From a delivery point of view, it's helping to give alignment and clarity as to what it is that we should be focusing on, and with that, helping a prioritization. It's helping to also foster client and stakeholder engagement, helping them to kind of focus on what they want in their requirements, as well as also helping future road mapping activities as well. And then from a marketing point of view, we hope that it's going to help give really kind of clear messaging. We're using it on Kyan.com and we're in the process of doing that kind of content direction piece. So hopefully that will help kind of give a clear route for that content creation, as well as helping kind of really focus on audience alignment, as well as optimizing our campaign and ultimately hoping to increase engagement. So where have we used it? So far, we've used it on Clairol, Odro, Premier League, Reshop, Yo Valley, Blackjack, Kyan, and Weller. So quite a variety and a diverse range of projects, from websites to web apps to mobile apps. But what I would like to do is just walk you through what we did with Premier League, using it on there. So for any of you who haven't worked on Premier League or not knowing exactly what we're doing for them at the moment, we're helping them to design and launch a mobile app. It's all about kind of giving the latest game news and also to those football coaches, and also helping with their career progression as well. With anything, it's always great to have a cross-functional team where possible, and for us, when we were working on Premier League and we were using the ORCA, we had Mike from product management, myself from user experience, Louise helping with product design, and Hamid Andy as our mobile engineer. So, going back to ORCA, we first started off answering the first question: what are the objects in the user's mental models? But before I jump into that, where do you find objects? Well, you can find objects in a variety of different places, all the way from what we've currently got within our mobile app, all the way through to actually conducting stakeholder interviews, user interviews, as well as looking at search analytics and service chat logs. So there's a variety of places where we can start to look at those objects, see how people kind of like are talking about them and how they're referring to them, to kind of help guide our work. But for Premier League, we looked at the current system just because of the time constraints that we had. I think we had about a week and a half. So what Louise and myself did is that we collected all the screens that we had in design and also in build, brought all of those together and started working through each of them and started to identify what we believe are the objects that are of value to users and what they would be potentially wanting to look for and interact with. With all of those, we brought those together and started consolidating those, looking to remove any like duplicate like possible objects, as well as start to kind of get alignment as to like what do we mean by an actual kind of object. So we had an instance where we had a development action plan and an action plan, and kind of going, well, these are two things that are like communicated within the app, but what is the actual difference? And we actually had to stop for a bit, like a half day, and go back to the client and just kind of get that alignment, because internally we didn't know where we needed to land on that. So that's one of the great things about going through this process. It's starting to kind of get that alignment. But working out what an actual object is, we can use an acronym called SIP, and that basically stands for structure, instances, and purposes. And for an object to exist, it needs to kind of answer these three questions. So if we take our example of a goal, does a goal have structure? We can say, yeah, it does. It's got a title, description, we can probably give it a type, a status, a due date, a call to action to update a goal, and we can probably relate and link through to other things like actions and reflections. Next, can a goal be replicated? Yeah, we can create a goal that could be around improving passing or developing leadership skills. And lastly, and one of the important things, and this is where research comes into play, does it serve a useful purpose? Like, yeah, we hear that it's gonna give purpose, or like, I want to view my goals while training, or want to view all my goals in one place. So that's how we can work out if we need to actually have an object in the actual system itself. Then we create our first valuable output, which is the object glossary. And this is an important one because this is around about shared understanding. And together as a team, we write basically a short little simple description as to what each and every one of these objects are, so that when anybody refers to these things at a later date, we all collectively understand what we mean by an action plan, for example. So that's the end of answering that question. And the nice thing as well with this, with the object glossary, we can choose to say these are the core objects that we want to focus on, and anything that is out of scope or we want to do later on, we'll still have it defined, we'll just park it to one side for the time being. But at least we've got an understanding and sight of that when that comes in later on. So next up is what are the objects' relationships to each other. So we take our core objects only that we want to focus on, and we use cardinalities, again, something that's going to be familiar to the engineering team. And using this kind of way of thinking about it, we can start to work out with an object, does it have one thing that it relates to? Can it have up to one thing? Can it have 0 to many or 1 to many? And from there, what we can then do is take our objects, put them all in a row, and then list those objects again on a vertical, and essentially create a matrix and start asking ourselves the questions, what does each object relate to, and create those relationships. But again, like, this is quite a complicated way of like looking at it, and we really want to make sure that anything that we create from this, we want to make it easily digestible and readable. So our second output is our object relationships, and taking those and just creating small little system models where we can basically show what the relationships to each of those are. And the nice thing that we can then also do from here is start to get early on kind of understanding of potential user flows through those objects. And the idea behind this is to kind of start working out what is the possible content navigation, getting people to navigate through the content, not just through a main navigation that we design and build. Main navigations are going to be still important and everything, but the idea here is trying to get people to engage with the content, things of value, and the main navigation is essentially a fire escape if they come to a dead end. So next up, what the call to actions do the objects offer our users. So again, because Premier League's already got an app, we could work out what those call to actions are, but what we wanted to do is work out the different types of call to actions. In ORCA, we've got two types, which are strong call to actions, and an example of that would be buy, follow, move, create, update, delete, merge, just to name a few. And from there, we managed to find all of those by going through our UX audit and start listing out each of those call to actions against our objects. We'll also have weak call to actions. They're still important, but those are the things that will just help someone progress through the experience. So from there, we've just got one which was like view all goals. But here, we really want to pay attention to our kind of strong call to actions. And this is where we can start to say, well, what call to actions really like generate value from like a business point of view, from like revenue to engagement, and also for our users. And we can then start to map what each of those call to actions drive in the way of value. This early on starts to get us thinking about what we want to potentially measure as we once we've got the app built and how people are using them. The other thing that we can also do at this point wasn't applicable for Premier League, but if there's different types of users, we can start to work out which call to actions belong to which users, thus creating an idea of early on user permissions. Lastly, what are the attributes that make up our objects? So this is really looking at now the content of our objects. So there's two different types of attributes here. Again, similar terms from an engineering point of view. We've got core content. So these are kind of like unique identifiers, text strings, different types of like media from imagery to video, anything that is unique to that particular object. So again, we went through the UX review that we did and surfaced all of those up. Then we looked at our metadata, and metadata is basically structured data that we can use to help basically filter, sort by our objects and their instances. So that includes stuff like date and time, location, statuses, and types. And we can then add that to our attributes there. So essentially, we've answered all four of the questions here, from objects to relationships, call to actions, and attributes. And this is where we can then start to bring it all together to create the object map and structure it as such here. And to give you a bit of an example, we've got the actual object map that we created for Premier League. This is all great as a starting point to know like what we want to be taking into design, but what this doesn't give us is an idea of like what order should all of this kind of appear or show to a user. So what we can do with an object map is that we can take the object map and then take inspiration from a mobile first approach. So if you think just a mobile, keeping it a blank screen, we can take in each of our columns, so take the action plan, and this is the order in which the object map displays it, and then we can work out together, and again taking insights as well from research and testing, is in what order should we be displaying this content. So in this case, for an action plan, we want to surface the title, description, number of goals, actions and reflections up at the top, and so on and so forth. And then what we can do is use this way of thinking of prioritization and apply that to each of our columns that we've got here. And again, this is where we have our our output on a prioritized object map, but again, it's still quite unwieldy to kind of like look at and kind of really make sense of it. So within the design team, with great help from Chris M, Helen, and Henry, we've created what is referred to as an object, prioritized object card that basically takes everything that we've just covered and just puts that all into one nice little panel that clearly gives the name of the object, what the definition of that object is, the breakdown of that anatomy, the object relationships that we've got, and at the bottom that you've just seen is the prioritized anatomy truncated from left to right. And basically we can create these cards and just bring these into any of our projects and use these as a guide to help us with our designs. So taking these object cards, how do we take this into design? So because we've already got our prioritization of our objects as blocks, it's a simple case of just taking those blocks and just kind of scaling them up and working out how do we actually want to best lay these out in a mobile or on the desktop layout. So as you can see here, however, each one of these kind of maps to each other. From that, once we've created our set of wireframes, we can create outputs like this where we can show all of our kind of our wireframe thinking that hopefully makes a lot more sense and a lot more easier to understand between design and development. So instead of us kind of giving you grayscale kind of like wireframes, we can kind of look at giving these types of wireframes that have a bit more meaning about it when it comes to understanding the O's, the R's, the C's, and the A's of ORCA. So how do we take this now from UI design? Well, the glorious thing about OUX wireframes is that it doesn't prescribe or dictate how a design should look like, but it just gives the guidance as to what should be displayed on the page, and it's carte blanche creative freedom for design to kind of render that however best is deemed to nicely visualize that for the brand. So here, as you can see, just a transition from wireframes into UI design, and largely it's pretty much on point. Obviously spacing and sizing will change and everything, but that's not for UX to kind of make those calls. It's just to kind of give a bit of a sense and direction basically, and like I said, not to be prescriptive in how something should visually look. So a little recap just on that then about ORCA. So it's a scalable, flexible, remixable and iterative framework that we can all work together on. It helps to uncover hidden complexity right from the start together. It helps foster that cross-functional understanding in language. It prevents that kind of throwing it over the fence and having to reverse engineer and work out what we need to be building. And giving that alignment as to what it is actually we should be looking to design and develop. And helps to avoid working in silos and, like I said, preventing tons of rework later on down the line when it can be quite cost prohibitive, and ultimately looks to enable direction for design, engineering and delivery. So what's the future of ORCA for us then? So short to long term, we want to continue developing our tooling and documentation so that we're creating output or documentation that is easy and to understand and is usable. We don't want it to be throwaway. We want it to be a living, breathing document. Early this year, me and Stephen and anybody else who is interested in this, we want to look into doing the masterclass of ORCA with Sophia Prater and really kind of getting deeper insight and building our knowledge. Then looking to take that knowledge and really practicing the 4 rounds of ORCA. So what we've walked through here, we've done elements across all of these, but there's additional activities that can help really improve how we go about things across each of our departments. And then lastly, towards the end of the year, a bit of an aspiration is looking to see how we can develop an ORCA 5-day sprint similar to a design sprint. And that is everything about ORCA and Wrangling Complexity. So thank you very much, and if anybody's got any questions, happy to answer. Silence is a good sign.
How do you see the 5-day sprint sort of going with clients and?
Yeah, so basically there is a suggested process for that, and there's going to be, like with a design sprint, we have the client in with us for certain days and certain activities. Again, there's the same kind of like way of thinking when it comes to an ORCA 5-day sprint. I think, as anything, we need to look at what's being suggested and like work with you and the team to kind of see how does that work for us at Kyan, because looking at some of the kind of early ways of working an ORCA sprint, it does seem quite labour intensive, and I don't want that to be that way. We want it to be fun and engaging experience. So like anything, it's practicing it, learning it, and then once we become fluent in that, is understanding how we can kind of tweak that to really go there. So yeah, something to kind of work on and explore this year, but yeah.
Got something to ask. So obviously there's kind of elements of this that when you come to break down a UX, you kind of, you're doing elements of this already, but it's not structured or articulated as clearly as this. But one thing that I've always found quite difficult is mapping relationships. So I just wondered if there's any kind of tools or approaches that you found particularly helpful when it gets very complex, mapping out how these elements relate to each other.
So it depends on the size of the system, right? So like with Premier League, we had a small kind of like subset. Like we've been on Reshop and Weller, we've gone to like 20, 30 like objects that we've tried to work out the relationship. But using like a practicing tool from the process called the nested object matrix, is just basically listing all the objects out along the top and again nested, and working the verticals down can really kind of help that. By trying to create a system model, that becomes like spaghetti junction and really difficult. So by doing it in the way that hopefully, well, you saw in the presentation, by taking that and then just kind of visualizing just like each object and where it links to and not any further than that, I feel like that's been an easier way to kind of communicate those relationships and how I've documented it and shared it with clients so far.
Cheers. How long was the Premier League process?
That's Louise, how long?
In 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, 2 or 3 days we did that in. And that's the thing with ORCA, like you can, it's like Parkinson's law, you can give it any amount of time, you can fill it up, but the thing is that you can do a really kind of short version of it as well.
It's a bit longer to have to go back to the client and say, what is this action plan that you
Okay.
want to
Yeah.
define?
It kind of as well pairs up with, like if you're going after a certain goal or a certain project, or you use like a UX link canvas against it, you kind of focus down into something opposed to just doing like a globalized, I want to create an app. You're kind of really focusing down into specific areas, and then you can create those objects and relationships a lot easier, opposed to just going, I've got an app,
Yeah.
create some stuff.
Yeah, there's different ways in which we can approach it and everything. It's just understanding like what's the best way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's fine. I was just wondering, how does the approach or process and stages differ for kind of existing products versus kind of a new product?
So, well, because Premier League being existing, we used the way of like just screenshot and bring that all together. If it was something that was completely from scratch, again, we've got to take into account like the speed and like budget constraints and time that we've got available. So, as you would have seen earlier on in the quarterly business meeting, we've got our Kyan digital product approach that we put together. And where ORCA sits within that is in that kind of middle diamond. It's like that definition, it can help. But we can start to do the activities and actually start surfacing all the information that we need to bring into ORCA through activities like stakeholder interviews, user interviews, and start kind of building a little like kind of pool of that information that we can take in. So again, it's down to like how much time we've got, what's our engagement like with the client, and kind of like I say, scaling it and remixing it to make sense for each project that we've got. So.